psychopath stepmom didn't want me to marry her daughter, so she burned down my wedding and told stepdad to hire a hitman to kill Guists. When I first met Emma in college, I knew she was the one for me. We met in a philosophy class of all places, and she challenged my thinking in ways no one else ever had. Her laughter was infectious, her intelligence captivating, and her kindness unmatched. We quickly became inseparable, spending countless hours talking about everything from Nietzsche to our favorite childhood cartoons. After 5 wonderful years together, I proposed to her on a beautiful spring day in the park where we had our first date. She said yes, and I felt like the luckiest person in the world. Our happiness, however, was overshadowed by one person, Emma's mother, Margaret. From the start, Margaret made it clear she didn't like me. She was polite in the beginning, but I could sense the disdain beneath her surface-level courtesy. I tried my best to win her over, thinking time would soften her. But as Emma and I got more serious, Margaret's politeness faded, revealing her true feelings. She was a traditionalist who had very specific ideas about who her daughter should marry. She envisioned someone wealthy, with an impressive lineage and a high societal status. I unfortunately didn't fit into any of those categories. I came from a modest background and was working hard to establish my career. Margaret's snide remarks about my job, my family, and my background were frequent and cutting. She would always make comments like, "Emma deserves someone who can provide for her," or "Our family has a certain reputation to uphold." Emma, to her credit, stood by me through it all. She defended me and tried to talk to her mother about her behavior, but Margaret was stubborn and unyielding. She insisted that Emma was making a huge mistake by being with me and that I would only bring her down. Despite this, Emma and I moved forward with our wedding plans. We were determined to start our life together, even if it meant dealing with Margaret's disapproval. As our wedding day approached, the tension with Margaret escalated. She became increasingly hostile, going as far as to suggest to Emma that she should call off the wedding. Emma was heartbroken by her mother's lack of support, but remained resolute. She loved me and was committed to our future together. Margaret's attempts to sway her only strengthened Emma's determination. The wedding preparations were a mix of joy and stress. Emma and I worked hard to create a day that would be memorable and special. We chose a beautiful venue, a charming countryside estate that offered a perfect blend of elegance and intimacy. It was everything we had ever dreamed of, and we couldn't wait to share it with our friends and family. Margaret's interference, however, was relentless. She criticized every decision we made, from the venue to the guest list, and tried to impose her own preferences on us. We managed to stand our ground, but it was exhausting. The night before the wedding, we hosted a rehearsal dinner. It was supposed to be a joyful gathering of our closest family and friends, but Margaret's presence cast a shadow over the evening. She was cold and distant, barely speaking to me and making Emma feel even more anxious about the following day. I tried to reassure Emma, telling her that everything would be perfect, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The wedding day finally arrived. Emma looked stunning in her dress, and I couldn't wait to see her walk down the aisle. As we prepared for the ceremony, I noticed Margaret lurking in the background, her expression dark and brooding. I tried to ignore her, focusing instead on the joy of marrying the love of my life. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Emma and I exchanged our vows, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything was perfect. However, that moment of bliss was short-lived. As we moved to the reception area, I noticed smoke in the distance. My heart sank and a sense of dread washed over me. I quickly realized that the smoke was coming from the direction of the wedding venue. Panic spread through the guests as they, too, noticed the smoke. Emma and I rushed to the source, our hearts pounding with fear. When we arrived, we were met with a horrifying sight. The reception area was engulfed in flames. Tables, decorations, and everything we had painstakingly planned for months were being consumed by the fire. The smell of burning wood and fabric filled the air, and the heat was overwhelming. Emma was in tears, and I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. How could this have happened? The fire department arrived quickly and began working to extinguish the flames. As they battled the fire, I noticed Margaret standing off to the side, her expression unreadable. A horrible suspicion began to form in my mind. Could she have done this? It seemed unthinkable, but given her intense dislike for me and her determination to stop the wedding, it wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. As the fire was brought under control, the fire chief approached us. He confirmed our worst fears. The fire had been deliberately set. It was arson. Emma's sobs grew louder, and I held her close, trying to comfort her. My anger towards Margaret intensified. I needed to confront her, to find out if she was responsible for this devastation. I approached Margaret, my heart racing with a mix of fury and dread. "Did you do this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with emotion. Margaret looked at me with a calm, almost smug expression. "I did what was necessary to protect my daughter," she replied coldly. My blood boiled. "You destroyed our wedding," I shouted. "How could you?" Margaret's expression didn't change. "Emma deserves better than you. I couldn't let her ruin her life." Emma, who had been standing beside me, looked at her mother with a mix of shock and sorrow. "Mom, how could you?" she cried. "I love him. You've ruined everything." Margaret's face softened slightly, but her resolve remained. "I did what I thought was best for you, Emma. One day you'll understand." The police arrived soon after, and Margaret was taken into custody. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she didn't deny her actions. As she was led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of relief mixed with sadness. Our wedding day had been destroyed, but at least Margaret would face the consequences of her actions. Despite the devastation, we decided to plan another wedding. However, Margaret's actions had left a deep rift in the family. Her husband, Harold, and several other family members were staunchly loyal to her, convinced that her actions had been justified. They viewed me as the enemy, who had driven Margaret to such extremes. As we moved forward with our wedding plans, the hostility from Harold and the others became increasingly apparent. Harold would send Emma scathing emails, accusing her of betraying her mother and destroying their family. Other family members would make snide remarks on social media, questioning my intentions and suggesting that I was only interested in Emma for her family's money. It was a constant barrage of negativity that took a toll on both of us. We had countless late-night conversations about whether we should go through with the wedding or simply elope to avoid the drama. But each time we decided we still wanted to have a wedding. On the day of our new wedding, the vineyard was beautifully decorated. The sun was shining, and everything seemed perfect. But as guests began to arrive, the atmosphere grew tense. Harold and the other hostile family members were there, their expressions sour and their words cutting. At one point, we saw Harold reaching in his bag to grab his phone. Then he dialed a number and got up to use the bathroom. This was very suspicious, but we decided not to let this mess up our special day, so we kept going. Right as we were about to kiss, a guest shouted out of fear. We looked back and saw something truly horrifying. 3 men in ski masks, holding gasoline, matches, rope, and tape. They had tied this particular guest to her chair and doused her in gasoline. All of the other guests got up and tried to escape, but to their horror, there was smoke all around the field. Emerging from the ground, there were flames. Growing by the second, at this point, we had realized what had happened. We realized Harold must have planned all of this, and it all made sense. Right as Harold took out his phone and ran to the bathroom, the killers had arrived. Once we realized this, we immediately called the police and firefighters, but once they had arrived, it was too late. The seats, vineyard, and field where we were having the wedding was completely destroyed, melted, burned. It was all gone. We were furious. We couldn't fathom how Harold could have done all of this, but we knew he probably did. But we needed evidence. So we tried everything. DNA testing, asking eyewitnesses, but nothing worked. But we couldn't give up. We needed to prove Harold had done this. So we got an idea. We hired a private investigator. After weeks of working with him, he had found just what we needed. He had found phone calls and texts between Harold and a man named Vince. Vince was a shady character known for his involvement in various illegal activities. The conversations between Harold and Vince were incriminating. They discussed money exchanges, secret meetings, and plans that matched up with the timeline of the crimes committed. We were shocked at the lengths Harold had gone to cover his tracks, but now we had the proof we needed to bring him down. We decided to confront Harold. With the evidence, we arranged a meeting at a neutral location, hoping to catch him off guard when we showed him the transcripts of his conversations with Vince. His face turned pale. He tried to deny it at first, but the weight of the evidence was too much for him to refute. His stammering and nervous glances confirmed our suspicions. We had him cornered. Just as we were about to call the authorities, Harold made a desperate attempt to escape, but we were ready for that. Our private investigator had alerted the police who were waiting nearby to apprehend him. Harold was arrested on the spot and taken into custody. As we watched him being led away in handcuffs, we felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. We had finally uncovered the truth and brought Harold to justice. The investigation revealed even more about his criminal activities and his connection to a larger network of crime syndicates. It turned out Harold was involved in money laundering, drug trafficking, and even more heinous acts. The authorities thanked us for our persistence and determination to see justice served. Harold faced multiple charges, and the evidence we had gathered ensured he would face the full consequences of his actions.